Is there a doctor on board? The in-flight call for a doctor ran through the plane. Although hesitant, I stood up and, along with another resident doctor who happened to be on board, attended to the collapsed woman. Little did I know at the time that this encounter would end up saving my future self and my mother. My name is Ryan, and I'm 41 years old. My profession is a neurosurgeon. Well, to be precise, I should say I was a neurosurgeon. I had been building a successful career as a neurosurgeon at a prestigious university hospital in Germany, but due to certain circumstances, I had decided to quit the hospital and return to America. I first came to Germany when I was 29. When I was working as a neurosurgeon at a university hospital in America, a world-renowned doctor named Dr. Alex Carter came for training. Alex's skills were outstanding, and as a young doctor, I was overwhelmed by his high level of technique and depth of knowledge. At the time, Alex was in his mid-30s. He would still be considered a young age for a doctor. However, his surgical skills were excellent, and he performed surgeries that thoroughly considered a patient's quality of life after the operation. To ease patients' anxieties, he always had a smile on his face. His approach of sometimes cracking jokes while staying close to each patient was exactly the kind of doctor I aspired to be. Once, an emergency patient from a traffic accident was brought in, and I was put in charge, but it was a difficult situation to save the patient's life. Of course, as a doctor, I did my best to treat the patient, but their condition rapidly deteriorated. It might be hopeless. Just as I, still inexperienced, was about to give up, Alex, who had suddenly become available, rushed over to help. His usual smile was gone, replaced by a stern expression. "Ryan, what are you giving up on? Huh? Right now, in this situation, you're the only one who can save this patient. Have you considered all the methods? Have you tried everything?" Those words made me catch my breath. I felt like Alex had seen right through my heart, and I was overcome with a sense of pathetic inadequacy. Alex quickly glanced at the surgical field and nodded once. "There's still a way. Let's try it." Alex swiftly explained the surgical method to the operating team and gave instructions. It was a method that I, with my limited experience, could never have come up with. "We can definitely do this. Let's all work together." Alex's words changed the atmosphere in the operating room. We would save this patient, no matter what. The staff, who had been on the verge of giving up, now had a completely different demeanor. The staff and I desperately clung to Alex's technique, and the surgery was successfully completed. 7 hours after the start of the surgery, we were somehow able to save the patient. Alex and I went to explain the course of the surgery and the patient's condition to the family. What about my wife? She's going to be okay, right?" the husband asked, holding a baby who had just started to hold its head up in a baby carrier, and holding the hand of a girl around 6 years old in his right hand. "Don't worry, the surgery went smoothly. Now we just have to wait for her to regain consciousness," I reassured him. At those words, the husband broke down in tears. "Oh, thank goodness. Lily, did you hear that? Mommy's going to be okay." "Really? Mommy's okay?" The girl called Lily also quickly welled up with tears. "Mommy, I want to see Mommy." As Lily started to cry, Alex gently picked her up. Alex was tall, at 6'3", perhaps surprised by the change in perspective. Lily momentarily stopped moving. Alex spoke gently to Lily with a smile. "Your mommy is fine. She's just sleeping peacefully right now. As soon as she wakes up and is able to talk, I promise we'll let you see her." "Really?" Lily asked Alex, her eyes still wet with tears. "Yeah, it's a promise. Do you know how to pinky swear?" "Uh-huh." Lily held out her little pinky and hugged it with Alex's pinky. "All right, it's a promise." Lily giggled and stopped crying. When Alex put her down, she clung to her father's leg. "Doctor, your English is very good." "Thank you. My wife is American, so I can speak English." "Ah, I see. That's wonderful." The husband now had room to smile, and they both thanked us many times. As we moved to another room with a nurse to explain the hospitalization plan, Lily waved and said, "Bye-bye, doctor." Both Alex and I waved back with a smile. The moment the door closed, I felt my strength drain away and leaned against a chair. I covered my face and let out a deep sigh. Thank goodness, really. For the first time in a long while as a doctor, I felt like I was about to cry. The tiny baby in the husband's arms. Lily, who had been worried about her mommy. I was so glad we were able to return their mommy to those two. Hearing me sniffle, Alex patted me on the head. That's great. It's the happiest moment of being a doctor. At his kind voice, my tears welled up even more. Thank you, Alex. It's all thanks to you. I never could have saved her on my own. I'm ashamed that I almost gave up halfway through. Yay, that's not good. No matter the situation, we have to do our best and keep trying. Every patient has someone important to them, someone who wants them to come back. Especially in tough situations, remember that. I nodded repeatedly at Alex's words. I think that was the moment I vowed to become a doctor like Alex. From then on, I stuck to Alex like glue whenever I had a little time, bombarding him with questions and imitating his techniques. When Alex was about to return to Germany, I made a reckless declaration. One day, I'll work together with you at your hospital. I'm definitely coming, so wait for me. My words drew smirks from the other doctors, but Alex didn't laugh. I'll be waiting for you, Ryan. Let's definitely work together. We shook hands firmly when I was 27. For the next 4 years, I desperately studied and honed my skills. I exchanged emails with Alex and got a lot of help with the procedures for going to and working in Germany. And at 29, I went to Germany to get my German medical license. To work as a doctor in Germany, you need to take the medical license exam unique to Germany. There are 3 steps. Step 1, which focuses on basic medical sciences. Step 2, which focuses on clinical medicine. And Step 3, which tests overall knowledge and practice. To work in Germany, you have to pass all the steps. You also need the ability to speak and understand German. Once you successfully pass the exam, you go through a matching process similar to job interviews in America and then start working at a hospital. Well, I was pretty busy after going to Germany. However, in terms of the hospital I would work at, Alex negotiated with the hospital, telling them I was coming and that he wanted me in the neurosurgery department. The hospital was happy to accept me based on Alex's recommendation, so things went smoothly. After successfully passing a license exam, I started working as a neurosurgeon at the hospital where Alex worked. How's the work here, Ryan? It's truly nothing but a learning experience. It's a stimulating environment, and everyone is kind. Well, there are some national characteristics, but I'm the type to speak frankly from the start, so it doesn't bother me. That's great. If there's anything, just let me know. Watched over by Alex, I was able to get along well with the other doctors, nurses, and staff. My life in Germany was truly fulfilling, but one day, a turning point arrived. Alex suddenly collapsed at the hospital. I found out about it when I finished another surgery. Ryan, can you get to the operating room right away? Alex collapsed. Michael is operating on him. What? I'll be right there. I ran and burst into the operating room. What's his condition? Michael, who was also my colleague, was desperately treating him. An aneurysm ruptured. It's a subarachnoid hemorrhage. His condition is terrible. Damn it. Hang in there, Alex. What? Alex had no medical history and didn't smoke or drink. But subarachnoid hemorrhages suddenly strike people in their prime, in their 40s and 50s. I can't believe this is happening. I'm going in too. Stay strong, Alex. Michael, the other staff, and I all desperately tried to save Alex. But we couldn't save Alex, and we were tormented by a sense of powerlessness. When I saw Alex's wife Emily and 5-year-old son Paul at the hospital, I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying. I'm so sorry. Emily, Paul, I'm truly sorry. I'm sorry. As I continued to cry, Emily gently embraced me. It's okay, thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. I know you did your best to try to save Alex. This must have been Alex's fate, right? Let's think of it that way. Despite her own pain, Emily said those words to me, and all I could do was keep apologizing. I know how much they loved each other. They were always saying I love you, showing affection, and expressing their feelings to each other. I was often invited to their house for meals, and every time I saw them, I thought about how I wanted to get married. When I think of the two of them, my tears won't stop. When I heard Emily's sobs and Paul's cries for his father coming from the room where Alex was laid out, I collapsed on the spot and wept. Alex's funeral was a grand affair, with many people attending to say their final goodbyes. After Alex's funeral, I found myself needing willpower to do anything. I somehow went to work at the hospital, but frightened by my own state, I informed the hospital of my intention to resign before I made a terrible mistake. I understand you're in pain. You were close with Alex. I think it's hard for you to sort out your feelings right now, so why don't you take some time off? The hospital tried to persuade me to stay and offered me an extended leave, but I politely declined and decided to return to America. I regret not saying goodbye to Emily, but I ran away because I couldn't face her. The plane shook with a thud, and I suddenly came back to my senses. If I space out, I start thinking about Alex. I tried to switch gears, sighing and sipping the cold coffee in front of me. The plane I'm on now is headed from Germany to America. I had no intention of returning to work as a doctor, and I was wondering what to do next. I needed to figure out what to do with myself going forward. That's when it happened. Is there a doctor on board? A call for a doctor went out in the cabin. Although I hesitated, the image of Alex flashed through my mind, and I found myself unable to raise my hand. Doctors on a plane have no legal obligation to respond to a call for a doctor. On a plane, unlike a normal hospital shift, the available medical equipment is limited. Under those circumstances, even if something happens to the patient, the doctor is not held responsible in principle. I stayed still and watched the situation. There might be another doctor on board, and in fact, one man had stepped forward. He was likely American. The flight attendant thanked him and guided the man. He's awfully young, I thought. Well, there are plenty of excellent doctors even at a young age. Since I had no intention of being a doctor anymore, I figured I'd let the younger generation handle it from here on out. But within 5 minutes, the flight attendant from earlier was walking briskly. Is there a doctor on board? If there is, please help. Her face was pale as she alternated between German and English announcements. She was desperately trying to maintain her composure, but she couldn't hide her ashen complexion. I wondered what had happened to the man from earlier. After much hesitation, I finally raised my hand. I'm a neurosurgeon. Really? Please come this way. Guided by the relieved flight attendant, I hurried to the first-class section. There, the man from earlier was deep in thought beside a woman lying on the floor. I quietly asked the flight attendant, "Isn't he a doctor?" "Yes, but he said he's a resident. He seems to be having trouble assessing the situation." "I see. It's admirable for a resident to raise their hand for a doctor call, but I guess it's hard to make a diagnosis when actually faced with the situation. I'll take over. I'm a neurosurgeon." "So you're a resident. Good job." I said this while patting the resident on the shoulder. "Thank you. I'm sorry. The diagnosis is..." I saw my past self in the way he bit his lip in frustration. On a plane, the equipment we can use is limited. Having to make a diagnosis under those conditions makes the difficulty level skyrocket. "All right, let's do this." "Yes, please." I first knelt beside the woman to assess the situation. The woman was unconscious. I asked the woman who was likely with her about the circumstances. Before she lost consciousness, did she say anything about pain or discomfort anywhere? Well, the woman was quite shaken, trembling with teary eyes. The flight attendant from earlier gently held her hand. "It's okay. Calm down. Tell the doctor what happened, what she said, what the situation was. Take deep breaths, deep breaths. The doctor is here now." She said this while breathing in and out together with the woman. Impressed, I continued to assess the woman's condition. Unconscious, knees and feet swollen. Loss of consciousness on the plane, knees and feet are swollen. And, she said she was having trouble breathing and her chest hurt. After that, she collapsed right away. I thanked the woman for the information and resumed questioning the resident. Adding the woman's story. What disease is most suspected for this woman? The resident muttered to himself for a bit before answering. Economy class syndrome. Pulmonary embolism. Correct, it's likely no mistake. How much longer until we reach the airport? I checked. About 10 more minutes. Well, that's fortunate in this unfortunate situation. Measure the oxygen saturation and blood pressure too. Yes. Anticipating that both the oxygen saturation and blood pressure would be low, I prepared an 4 in an embu bag with a reservoir. Oxygen saturation is low. Blood pressure is under 70. Use the embu bag. Start the 4 at full speed. After I placed the 4 line, the flight attendant from earlier said, "I've got the 4 bag. Thank you." As I administered oxygen by squeezing the embu bag and treated with the 4, both the blood pressure and oxygen saturation started to rise. They're going up. Good. Let's leave the rest to the ambulance crew waiting for us on the ground. After that, she'll get treatment for the embolism. The moment a sense of relief spread through the area, the impact of landing hit. We've landed. Thank goodness. After that, we cooperated with the emergency team waiting on the ground and accompanied the patient to the hospital. The patient safely received treatment for pulmonary embolism and apparently made it out of the danger zone. That's great. You did well, resident. I didn't do anything. If you hadn't been here, doctor. Which hospital do you work at? When I spoke to the resident, he looked frustrated for a moment before asking me that. Well, I'm actually quitting being a doctor. What? What do you mean? Cutting off the resident as he started to speak, I told him, do your best. Keep working hard to save people. Ignoring his calls for me to wait, I left the hospital and headed to my parents' house by taxi. I fell fast asleep in the taxi and got out still groggy from my nap. I'm home. Oh, Ryan, welcome back. The long trip must have been rough. You never visit, so I called. My mother Maria greeted me with a smile. At my mother's words, I remembered I had left my phone in airplane mode. I could only apologize. Sorry. Actually, on the plane. I didn't give the details, but I lightly talked about what had happened on the plane. So that's what happened. Well, I'm glad to hear that person is likely to make it. I think she'll be fine in that condition. I had a breather at my parents' house for the first time in a while, eating my mother's home cooking. My mother had sent me off with a smile when I went to Germany to become a doctor like Alex. I had told my mother about Alex and that I was thinking of quitting being a doctor. I'm quitting being a doctor. Can I come back home, Mom? When I told her in a strained voice, she said come on home in her usual tone. I'm grateful to her for that. Now, you should relax a bit too. You've been working hard for a long time. Yeah, thanks. In my own room, I was able to sleep soundly for the first time in a really long while. Ryan, still sleeping. Huh? Seriously? 9 o'clock. I hurriedly got up. Sorry, I slept too much. Morning, Mom. Nothing to apologize for. You can take it easy. You want breakfast? Yes. I ate my mother's cooking, slept in, and spent my days doing what I liked. A new library had been built near the house, and I started going to the library in the afternoons, enjoying my leisurely time. But I can't live like this forever. I have savings, and I'm giving money to my mother, but I really should work. But what should I do? As I was thinking about that, I found a paper recruiting librarians at the library I frequented. This might be good. Maybe I'll just apply and see. Muttering that to myself, I told the librarians, who had become familiar faces, that I wanted to interview for the librarian position. Everyone was happy to have a man's help, and a few days later I went for an interview with my resume. I was hired right away. To become a librarian, you need a certification. They told me I just needed to take the librarian training courses offered at universities and such. On the condition that I get that certification, I was hired in a position like a librarian apprentice. I was the most surprised at how smoothly it all went. I didn't write that I had a medical license on my resume. I had no intention of going back to being a doctor, and I thought it would be fine to just live a modest life here. When I told my mother I had gotten a job at the library, she seemed happy. Oh, really? We'll have to celebrate. Mom enthusiastically made a lot of my favorite foods. Mom also used the library, so she was familiar with the librarians. Everyone will be so surprised you're my son. I'll go with you next time. Mom had a delighted expression. And the next day, she followed through. She came while I was working and told the librarians, actually, he's my son. Everyone was surprised but accepted it, saying, you do resemble each other. The library patrons were all nice people too, and I quickly grew to love this job. How long has it been since then? That day, I was cleaning returned books and putting them back on the shelves when I heard a dull thud and a scream. What was that? As I poked my head out from behind the shelf, Miss Johnson, one of the librarians, came running over, her face pale. It was unusual for Miss Johnson, who was strict about library etiquette, so I called out to her without thinking. "Miss Johnson, are you okay? Did something happen?" When Miss Johnson saw me, she grabbed my arm. What? Miss Johnson, there you are. Ryan, your mother suddenly collapsed. My mother. I ran, practically dragging Miss Johnson. A crowd had gathered in front of the checkout counter. "Please move. Out of the way." I slid my body into the crowd. My mother was having a seizure and was unconscious. Mom, hang in there. Can you hear me?" Seeing her collapsed form overlapped with Alex in my mind, and I panicked. It was unbecoming of a doctor, but I was so terrified I wanted to run away. "Is the ambulance coming?" "It's already been called." Voices passed by my ears. What should I do? Assess the situation. Breathing. What's causing the loss of consciousness? Words just swirled around in my head. At that moment, my hands were firmly grasped. "It's okay. Calm down, doctor. Calmly assess your mother's condition." "Doctor, look at me." At those words, I looked into the eyes of the person in front of me. Confirming eye contact, she smiled. The familiar woman was the flight attendant from that time on the plane. "You're the flight attendant from the plane." She nodded with a smile at my words. "Doctor, that's your mother, right? You have to save her no matter what." "You can do it, doctor." When she gripped my hands tightly, strangely, my emotions welled up and tears came out. I nodded, released my hands, and wiped my tears. "Is there a first aid kit?" "We don't have anything that fancy." "What should we do?" She suddenly collapsed, saying her head hurt. Miss Johnson looked on the verge of tears. "Headache, followed by loss of consciousness. Could it be a cerebral hemorrhage?" "It'll be all right. First I want to check her pulse and blood pressure." Just as I started to say that, I heard the sound of an ambulance siren. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly loaded her into the ambulance. "Based on the situation, a brain disorder is suspected. Can you take her to a nearby neurosurgery department? In that case, to Miller Neurosurgery." "Doctor, please perform any treatments you can in the ambulance." "What? But I'm the daughter of the director there. I'll call my father directly, so hurry." At her words, I performed the treatments I could in the ambulance. She had been speaking hurriedly on her cell phone, but she handed the phone to the paramedics. They seemed to have quickly agreed, and the ambulance headed for Miller Neurosurgery. "I'll go by car right away too." We soon arrived at Miller Neurosurgery. Doctors and nurses were waiting at the emergency entrance, and I accompanied them running to the operating room while explaining my mother's condition. "Please wait here." As I watched my mother being carried away on a stretcher, I surprised even myself by saying these words. "Could I also be allowed into the operating room?" "What?" "Well, I'm a neurosurgeon. I was at Sword University Hospital in Germany until half a year ago." "What? Sword University Hospital? But still, it's all right, Ethan. Let him in." At that moment, an elderly woman's voice called out. The woman from earlier was standing next to her. "Huh?" I thought, and called out. "You're the one from that time. I'm so glad to see you doing well." When I said that, the woman smiled at me. "It's thanks to you. Thank you so much. Ethan, hurry. Bring this doctor with you too. Thank you for saving my mother at that time. I truly appreciate it." "Got it, Mom. Let's hurry. Thank you so much. I'm truly grateful." I quickly changed into surgical scrubs and entered the operating room. The doctor briefly explained that I was the son and a neurosurgeon. I watched the surgeon's hand movements, but his speed was not satisfactory. "I'm sorry, but could you switch with me? She's your mother, right? There's a risk you might not be able to make calm judgments, so I can't switch." "It's precisely because she's my mother. Your technique won't make it in time. I'll take responsibility." At my offer, the surgeon looked displeased, but at the words let him take over from the doctor who had entered with me. He reluctantly nodded. "Thank you so much. It was my first surgery in half a year, but my fingers and experience never betrayed me. I focused on treating my mother. He's so fast, and his movements don't waver at all even at this speed. I finished all the treatments at what was probably my fastest speed ever. After watching over my mother as she was transported to the ICU and checking her post-operative condition, I was suddenly hit with exhaustion. The one who called out to me then was the flight attendant. "I'm so glad, doctor. What a relief. If you don't mind, could we talk for a bit?" "Sure, by all means." I nodded and followed her. It was a room labeled Chairman's office. "Grandma." I brought him. The woman from earlier was sitting at the desk. "Thank you. Now, doctor, please have a seat." "Excuse me," I said briefly and sat on the sofa facing the women. "Nice to meet you. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jessica. I'm the chairman of this hospital. This girl is my granddaughter Sarah, and this is my son Ethan, the director of the hospital. Thank you so much for properly treating my mother. It's thanks to you that my mother was saved." I heard everything from Sarah. I'm nothing but grateful. I was so worried that the resident doctor might not be able to do it. "It's because you were there, doctor, that Grandma was saved." The whole family looked at me again, saying thank you so much. I hurriedly shook my head. No, I just did what any doctor would naturally do. No, actually, I don't even deserve your gratitude. At first, I was even trying to turn a blind eye. I had intended to quit being a doctor. Ethan was the one who reacted to my statement. Pardon me, but was that because of what happened with Alex? I was truly surprised when Ethan brought up Alex. "How did you know about that?" "I apologize. I inquired with Sword University Hospital, which you mentioned earlier, about whether there was an American doctor named Ryan. Based on my daughter's story and your knowledge, I believed you were a real doctor. I'm truly sorry. It was a violation of your privacy." "No, it's all right. Of course, that's understandable. For me to suddenly show up and ask to be let into the operating room, it would be a huge issue even if I wasn't a doctor. I'm the one who should apologize." I was so surprised, I raised my voice. At that time, I had a conversation with the director and heard about Dr. Alex, about how you felt responsible for what happened to Alex, and how you couldn't fully cope with the pain of not being able to save him. The director also deeply regretted it. He wished he had been more considerate of your feelings, Ryan. He felt he had closed off the path of a promising surgeon. I recalled the face of Brandon, the director, the kind and caring Brandon, who even transformed into a clown for pediatric patients. Even though he must have been hurting too, he had tried to support me. But at that time, I rejected everything and returned to America. Did he seem well? My voice turned tearful as I asked. Jessica gave a gentle smile. "Yes, he wanted to see you. And Ryan, I have a message for you from Emily." The mention of Emily's words was a shock, making my heart race. Ethan had handed Jessica a memo. I had her write down the message. "May I read it?" "Yes, please." When I managed to nod, Jessica nodded once and began to read. "Ryan, are you doing well? Thank you for attending Alex's funeral. I tried to contact you right after you quit the hospital, but time just passed as I kept worrying. I'm sorry." Jessica's way of speaking was so gentle, it really felt like Emily was reading it to me. "Ryan, what happened to Alex was not your fault." "Absolutely not. His condition was severe, and by the time you arrived, it was almost too late. But when I heard how hard you tried to save Alex, I was truly happy from the bottom of my heart." My tears were already overflowing and wouldn't stop. Sarah handed me tissues to wipe my tears. "Ryan, Alex always said you were like a little brother to him, that you were so dear to him, he couldn't help it. He happily talked about how meeting you was wonderful, but he also worried that you were too kind and sensitive." I let out a small chuckle. "He said I was like a little brother and doted on me." "Ryan, Alex can no longer save patients, but you're different. Please, save patients for Alex's sake too. Won't you carry on Alex's wish to help people? Paul says he wants to become a doctor like his dad and you, Ryan. So I'd be happy if you could keep at it until Paul gets his medical license." "How many years is that, Emily?" "That's quite a while," I said jokingly while wiping my tears. 5-year-old Paul was truly adorable. He was attached to me too, and I arbitrarily thought of him like my own child. The number of people who will be saved by you returning to the path of a doctor is countless. I'm hoping that you'll go back to being a doctor. Let me know when things settle down. I'll be waiting anxiously. That's all." I kept wiping my unceasing tears. Everyone was crying. The tissues weren't enough for Sarah, so she pulled out a large towel from somewhere to wipe her tears. "Today, you saved your precious mother with your own hands. I'm so glad. Yes, truly. I'm really glad. Jessica held my hand until I stopped crying. It's a secret that the warmth reminded me of my mother and made me cry even more. My mother fully regained consciousness a week later. I was called in after she became able to talk. Mom, are you okay? Do you recognize me? Ryan, I recognize you. You collapsed. I'll explain properly. The moment I stood up, she tugged on my clothes. Hey, Mom, that's dangerous. I said that, but she probably didn't hear me. Her eyes were teary. Why are you wearing a white coat? I felt a lump in my throat, but I desperately swallowed it down. I gently held my mother's hand. I went back to being a doctor. I decided to work at this hospital. When I told her that, tears spilled from my mother's eyes. She squeezed my hand back with a smile. I see. That's wonderful, Ryan. My mother kept saying that's great. I'm sorry for worrying you. I'm so sorry. I believed in you. I believed you'd be all right, Ryan. I always believed in you. I could only nod while crying. We held hands and cried together for a while. Fortunately, my mother was left with no noticeable after effects. She needs to regain her strength through rehabilitation, but she's positive about it. By being able to save my mother, I think I was able to properly face Alex's death. About 3 months after my mother was discharged, I decided to go to Germany. I said I could go to Germany a bit later, but I gratefully followed my mother's words. I'm fine now. Hurry and go see Emily and Paul. To me, who kept worrying, my mother said, it was you, Ryan, not anyone else, who performed my surgery. Don't you believe in your own surgical skills? When she put it that way, I couldn't argue. And so, I found myself on a plane to Germany. I packed my suitcase to the brim with train toys that Paul loves. I called Emily. I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to see you, so be careful. I'll talk a lot about Alex with Emily. I'll play with trains together with Paul. As I was feeling excited, I heard a familiar call. It was a call for a doctor. I felt a bit of deja vu, but I raised my hand to the flight attendant without hesitation. I'm a doctor. Please guide me. I won't hesitate anymore. There will be tough times. There are lives that can't be saved no matter what we do, which is sad. But in order to save as many precious people as possible, I'll continue being a doctor until the time I fulfill that important promise.